Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our rare webinar, Poster Presentation Workshop 2, presented by Ben Ford and Mosami both. For those of you who need to jump off early or will be joining us late, we are recording this, and so the recording and slides will be available hopefully within the next couple of days. I will email everyone who has registered for this event, and they will be able to find these on our website. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask for Ben and Mosami to go ahead and join us.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
And Ben, I'm going to go ahead and give you presenter privileges, or should I give it to Mosami?
Give it to Musumi.
Okay.
She is the architect of the slide deck.
All right, perfect. So Mosami, you have presentation. You can control the presentation, so go ahead and go for it.
Okay. Are you guys seeing the first slide? Because that's what I'm seeing. Is that correct?
I have. Let's just make sure.
So I'm gonna advance and tell me if it advances on the thing too.
Sure.
Did it advance?
Nope. Let me go ahead and try one more time.
Okay. It says you're now the presenter. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that...
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Did it go to the call-in information one?
No. Try one more time.
Okay. I'm going back and forth.
Oh no. Okay. Hang on. Oh, technical difficulties. So sorry, everyone.
It says I'm the presenter. Yeah, I don't know.
Hang on. Let me go ahead and do this. All right, Mosami, go ahead and give it a try.
Okay. I just advanced.
Oh, you know what? Actually, if you use your mouse, there is a button on the left side that you can hover over.
Okay.
With an arrow under the 2.
Oh, okay. I see.
Oh, there we go. Okay, and Go ahead, take it away, Mosami.
Okay. So, Ashley, do you want to say anything about the call-in information, or?
No, if anyone's joining us and unable to see the slides but would like to just call in, the call-in information, again, is online. But again, we are recording all of this, so everything will be provided hopefully in the next couple of days after this presentation.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going, and then okay, so that I'm going to just continue advancing, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to first hand it over to Ben to introduce himself, since that's his slide. Ben, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Let's see. So about me, my name is Ben Ford. It's a pleasure to be a part of this. I'm super excited to contribute because being a scientist and having a background in biomedical research, I kind of understand or have an appreciation for the language that gets spoken and the communication styles. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about the scientific community is the platform that poster presentations give people to share their story. And I really think that that's something that lends itself well to the rare disease advocacy space as we look at ways to communicate. I work closely with the CORDS registry at Stanford Research, and we work with a lot of advocacy organizations to build registries. And I often think of this scenario between researchers and rare disease advocates almost like you have a group of teenagers at a high school dance, where you have all the boys on one side and all the girls on the other, and everybody wants to talk to each other, but nobody really knows how to take that first step out. And I really think that tools like this help bridge that gap. And if you have the ability to present a poster at a scientific conference, it's a great way to kind of meet people where they are and communicate in a way that they're familiar with. So I'm really excited to play a role here. A little bit about me professionally. I'm the program director for the CORDS Registry and Strategic Partnerships at Stanford Research. I worked in a biomedical research lab for about a decade, and I've presented posters at dozens of conferences of all different sizes, from large international conferences to very small family meetings. And so that's a little bit about me, and I'm super happy to do this with Mosami, who I view as an expert in poster presentation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've done a few. I want to also say thank you for all of you being on the line today, and I want to thank Ben for inviting me to speak here, and I want to thank Global Genes for hosting this webinar series. Before I get into talking a little bit about myself, I will say that sort of going off of what Ben was saying, there, when you're looking at scientific research and advocacy, I have a sort of foothold in both of these things, but really there's a lot of parallels there, and there's a lot of room for overlap and communication in these two sort of spaces. And that's really evident when you look at putting together a poster presentation. When you are presenting scientific research or you're presenting on some kind of advocacy initiative, the language is essentially the same, and you'll see that even though I come from mainly a scientific background, you can apply a lot of the things that I'm saying to the presentation of your organization's advocacy initiatives. So just sort of keep that in mind, and if you have any questions on sort of relating the two at the end, please feel free to ask. So a little bit about me. I got into the rare disease space because my first son was born with a rare disease called Zellweger spectrum disorder, and it was through my experience with him that got me into rare disease advocacy. Before Ilan, my son, was born, I was actually a researcher in the field of nutrition, and I stopped working to take care of him with the sort of expectation that I was never going to really go back into research again. But because of the advocacy work that I was doing, I was able to kind of find my voice again in research, and now in the rare disease space. So what does all this have to do with poster presentations? I've actually presented a few poster presentations as a rare disease researcher and an advocate once at the Global Genes Summit. I presented twice. I presented a poster twice at the Nord Summit. I presented a poster at the Conference for Clinical Research in Rare Disease, which is a biannual event that's primarily attended by clinicians, but it's a really great event for rare disease advocates to go to. So if you ever get a chance, I would highly recommend it. And then before I got into this rare disease space, I actually participated in a lot of scientific conferences that had poster presentations. Actually, in both graduate school and in my postdoctoral experience, I actually won awards for some of my posters, and I've learned a lot during that time and since then. So I'm happy to be able to share this information with you, and I hope that it's something that's useful to you. So I want to just get started by saying, before you open up your software that you're going to use to create your poster, and we'll talk about software in a little bit, there's a couple of things I want that I would suggest thinking about prior to starting your poster. So the first thing is, where are you going and who's going to be there? So I'll start with who's going to be there. It's really important for you to understand who your audience is before you figure out what information you're going to put into your poster. Are they clinicians? Are they advocates? Are they researchers? Are they all of these things? Is it the general public? And so knowing your audience at least gives you an opportunity to understand what matters to your audience. And when you understand what matters to your audience, that will really that will help you determine what your actual take-home message is in your poster presentation. So that sort of leads me to my next step, which is determine what your take-home message is. Before you get started in any content in your poster, you want to have one simple, one-sentence kind of message regarding what your poster presentation is going to say. And usually that message is, why is this activity, whatever it is that you're presenting on, why is it important, and what are the broad implications and the big picture kind of things about this particular activity. So having that message set prior to starting your presentation allows you to have a sort of measure of when you are developing content for your poster, and you have these different sections of these posters of your poster presentation, that you don't really want to be kind of individual silos. You want all of these sections of your poster to kind of be pieces of a big picture, and that big picture is your take-home message. So you can use that take-home message from the get-go as you develop content for your poster presentation, and once you finish a section, say, hey, does this information adequately reflect what my take-home message says. So that's the second thing that I would say before you start your poster. And going back to this idea of where you're going and who's going to be there, understanding what your conference space is like is going to be really important with the sort of formatting and the size of your poster. A lot of these conferences will have specific poster size requirements, so make sure you understand what that is prior to starting your poster. Some of them may even give guidance on font and graphic size. So knowing all of this information before you start your poster is a really good way to kick off constructing your poster so that you can avoid having to go back and change a bunch of things once you've started already adding content. Okay, so that's what you do before you start your poster. So let's talk a little bit about the poster itself. So now you've opened up your software and you have this big blank space of how you're going to put your poster together. Now, I have most experience using PowerPoint as the software, but I will talk about a few other software options that you can use. Now, when we're talking about the poster presentation, there are multiple sections that you want to include in the content of your poster, and instead of listing them in a sort of bulleted kind of format, what I did is provide a little bit of a template of a poster with the what I would recommend as appropriate sections for a poster. And the reason that I did that is so that you can see somewhat of a, and I get an idea of how some of these elements can be formatted. Now, this isn't the only way to format this information. Actually, this image that you see here is a screenshot that I got from this website that you see at the bottom of the screen. And this particular blog has so much good information on the construction of scientific poster presentations. And not only that, this screenshot is an actual downloadable template that is found on this website, and it's got it's got this type of template with this format that's horizontal. It's got other templates that are vertical. So you have a number of formats that you can choose from, that if you want to use PowerPoint as the software tool that you're going to use to make your poster presentation, you can directly download them from this website. So what you're doing here, regardless of whether or not you are presenting scientific research or you're presenting on some sort of advocacy initiative, is showcasing some activity. And that's what all of these sections are meant to inform. So here are the general sections. You've got your title usually across the top, and following that you have your authors of the poster presentation, followed by their affiliation, what organization they are affiliated with. And then with the different sections, you generally have a background section, an activities or a methodology section, a results or an outcome section, and a conclusion section. So those are the big parts of the poster presentation. I'll talk also about the references and the acknowledgement section as we continue on in this presentation. So now let's start breaking down some of these sections. So starting with the background, what you are really looking for in a background is the rationale for why you're presenting this information. Why is this information important? And if you're in sort of the healthcare space, which is probably the case here, you want to provide generally scientific evidence or some sort of facts that support the need for whatever it is that you're presenting on. Now, a lot of times in your background section, you may choose to include the abstract that you use to submit to the conference that you're presenting at. So this would be the appropriate place to put that. I will say though, as more and more people are opting to either use an abridged form of the abstract or just take the abstract out altogether. And the sort of reasoning behind that is because when you're doing your whole poster, looking at the whole poster presentation, you really want to have a balance of text and graphics. And Ben, I know that we've had some conversations about this, so I'll certainly let you sort of share your thoughts on this. But it's important to very clearly state what you're doing, but a lot of times a lot of words can be sort of hard to read, especially when you are in a poster presentation setting. And you want to do a good balance between graphics to sort of catch people, to make things, to get people to come in to look at your poster, but then you also want to have enough text so that your take-home message isn't so esoteric that nobody understands what's happening because there's only images there. Ben, did you want to say something with regards to that?
Yeah, I think it might be worth mentioning that in the first webinar, for those of you that hung out and listened to me babble on in that first that first instance of this, we talked a lot about building out an abstract, and the abstract is something that is submitted to the conference and is reviewed by.
Uh-oh.
Hi, did we lose audio?
I'm still here. Can you hear me, Ashley?
I can. Ben, can you hear us?
And what you set out to do in the project that you're outlining.
Hey, Ben. So sorry. Could you maybe backpedal about 30 seconds? I think we lost you on audio.
Oh, no. Okay. So I was really just saying that in the first part of the first webinar, we talked about building the abstract, and then that's what gets submitted to the conference organizers, and they will review those, and that's kind of how you get your foot in the door. That's how you get selected to give a poster presentation. Each conference, some conferences that are more clinical may have very specific requirements on posters, and one of those requirements might be that you put your abstract on there. But like Musumi said, I think it's always a great idea to include at least an abridged version of that, so that when a person just randomly walks up to your poster, they can get a good idea of what you're generally trying to say. Well, what's the general gist of this project that you set out to accomplish, and a little bit of the story that you're trying to tell. That way you kind of open yourself up later on to use much more data, images, and things to tell that story, because they've kind of got that background. So that's pretty much all I would say there.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. And sort of piggybacking off of what Ben just said, really in terms of making that decision as to whether or not you include your full abstract, an abridged abstract, or no abstract, a good place to start is really figuring out what the conference poster requirements are. You may have to actually include your abstract, and that would be a good place to figure out what it is that you want to include in your background. But generally, you want to put information that supports the need for your activity or for your research. And at the end of the background, whatever it is you do, whether it's inclusion of the abstract or not, you want to make sure that you very clearly delineate what the purpose of this activity is. So you can explicitly say the purpose of this study or this purpose of this activity is, this might be a good time to explicitly state what your, at least part of your take-home message, if you choose to do that. But the purpose of that is to really kind of segue into the next section, which is actually a description of your activities. Now here you are going to provide details on what were the steps of the activities that you are presenting on. And you can choose to present this information, these steps, in a few ways. You can use text if you like. You can also choose to do a flow chart, which is why I have this little image here. And lay out the steps that you use to conduct these activities in that way. Whatever it is that you do, it's really important that the language that you use in this section is clear and easily understood by the general public, with little to no technical jargon if possible. You may be at a conference where it's a very specific group of people and they may understand that jargon, but it's overall just good practice to try to have as much broad access as possible to things like your methodology. So the next section is of your poster is your outcomes or your results section, and this is generally the biggest part of your poster because this is really where you are showing what you achieved or found out as a result of this activity. So you may have a lot of information that you want to share in this particular section, and at this point, it's really what you want to do is you set aside the amount of space that you have for the section, and like I said before, this is really where you want the bulk of your content to go. But you're more likely than not, you're not going to be able to show every single detail of your findings, of your outcomes. So you have to make a decision of what are the most significant findings in your activity, what are the most significant outcomes in your activity, and what is it that you want to share. And the way that you determine that is sort of figure out what is most directly related to your take-home message. So once you determine what that information is and that you can fit it into the space that you've allotted for your outcome section, then you have a number of things that you can do to present that information. So you can present it in text, you can do it in tables, and then you could also use charts, graphs, images, infographics to show some of your findings. And I'm going to give you an example of something I did in a poster that I presented a little while back with respect to using images and charts. But before I show you that, I just want to talk a little bit about the use of images. The first thing I will say is that, in the sort of cursory research that I did in preparation for this webinar, most websites that I've seen recommend that you use images that have a resolution of 300 dpi or higher. Now, this sort of recommendation is very relative to what is the size of your poster. So the bigger the size of your poster, then you may need to up that resolution a little bit more. But this is the general rule. So resolution with respect to images. And then the other thing I want to say regarding images is you want to make sure that the majority of the images that you put into your poster presentation are at least for the most part, your own. Because if they're not your own, then you have to deal with issues like copyright infringement. I should say that taking things off of Google Images is really easy to do, but they are subject to copyright infringement. They say that explicitly on the Google Images page. So, if you use them at these conference presentations, this is something you have to just sort of think about. And, I'll let you all make the decision as to whether or not you use them, but understand that the use of images from something like Google Images may be subject to copyright infringement. Related to that, being in the advocacy space, you may want to include pictures of people in your patient community in your poster presentation, which is fine. I think that's a great idea if that's appropriate to what it is that you're trying to share. But you have to make sure that whoever's image you share on these posters, you have explicit permission from them or from their families to use that image in your poster presentation. I know that a lot of advocacy organizations have mechanisms for image release forms. This would be a good use of the image release form mechanism so that these pictures or images can be used in a poster presentation. So that's all I'll say with specifics to images. I want to just share with you can everybody, Ashley, can you see that? I just switched slides and I just realized I didn't use the cursor.
Yeah, I'm checking on them too.
Okay, cool. So this is a poster that I presented at the NORD Summit a little while back, and the reason that I'm showing this is really to emphasize this point of how you choose to display your findings should be at least somewhat based on what it is that you are trying to highlight. So in this particular case, I was doing a study where the majority of my data was feedback from my patient family. So their quotes, their words, their conversations were were probably the most valuable part of that study, and that's really what I wanted to highlight. So what I chose to do in presenting that information is show their quotes in these little thought bubble animations, and put it together that way. And that's sort of my sort of effort in trying to make something eye-catching so that people would come, that would be interested in learning about what the heck these thought bubbles were doing here in the middle of a poster. And even though there's a lot of words here, having those images there really drew a big crowd in some of these conferences that I presented this poster at. So be creative in how you present this information. Just make sure that it's clear and stays true to what your take-home message is. So I did this thought bubble thing in order to sort of highlight what I felt was the most important information in my study, and then I wanted to put that in contrast to the table you see right next to it, which was my demographic information, and it's very boring and nobody wants to look at it because it's a big table. For me, the quotes from my families were much more important than where they lived or what their marital status was, but it was still information that I felt like needed to be kept in there. So I chose to do a table. I could have chosen something that was more eye-popping, like a bar graph, and that's really making that choice is really on you and what you want to highlight in your in the information that you want to share about your activity. So in your conclusion, and I want to apologize, this is the end image there is not to represent the end of my talk. It's just the end of some of the important information in your poster. So you still have a little bit more of having to deal with me, and I apologize for that. So with the conclusion, first thing I'll say about the conclusion part of the poster is that this is probably where, and this is my opinion, and Ben, if you have some thoughts on it, feel free to share. This is where I think if you're going to have text, this is really where you want it, because you want to be extremely clear about what your overall message is. This is a section where you want to either state or restate, if you've already done it before, your take-home message. You want to be clear about how your data, your outcomes, your results section relates back to your take-home message, so you want to make that connection clear. And then expanding on that a little, talking a little bit about why your take-home message is relevant and important to your target audience, and then expanding on that some more, and kind of showing that, this activity is not this sort of static silo thing, that you are thinking about what are the next steps in these activities, what are some future directions that you can go with the information that you found out through this study, through this activity. So that's the sort of probably the most important parts of the poster, but I'll talk a little bit about references and acknowledgments. If you are using any information that's not directly from you or directly from the activity that you're doing, if you're using any sort of background information to help support a rationale for doing your activity, then you need to cite the references that you got them from. So I would recommend doing both in-text citations in the appropriate sections, and also doing a little bibliography section somewhere in the poster. I generally do my bibliography section in a smaller font than the other sections, but I do like to have it in there. And the conference organizer or the sponsor, they may have guidance as to what reference formatting style you want to use. Usually they don't. I would suggest that whatever formatting style you want to use for your references and in-text citations, just be consistent throughout the whole poster. Another section that's important is your acknowledgments, and when you are acknowledging people in your poster presentation or institutions, you are basically giving credit to anyone or any organization who contributed to any aspect of your activity, of your study. So, and I'll say that, and then follow with, but if they're already an author of the poster, okay, and those authors are listed up top, then you don't necessarily need to include them in your acknowledgments. But one thing that you do need to acknowledge in your acknowledgments is if you had any sort of funding or support of this activity or this study, then you need to make sure that that's clear. Some funders will actually have explicit rules about acknowledging their institution in any sort of documentation like poster presentations. So if you do have some funding, make sure you understand the ins and outs of that and how you're actually supposed to document or acknowledge them as a funder or a supporter of the information presented in your poster presentation. Okay, so that's the meat of the poster presentation, and I'll sort of stop with that information. I want to talk just very briefly about choosing software for a poster presentation. I've found in my experience that most people use Microsoft PowerPoint. You could probably also use Microsoft Publisher if you wanted to, but most people I see use PowerPoint, so I'm going to speak to that a little bit. But please understand, there are lots of different types of softwares that you can use to create a poster. You can use, if you're much more adept at Adobe Suite. I'm not. I think that you can use both Illustrator or Photoshop, and you may even be able to come up with presentations that have more bells and whistles. But Microsoft Office, Microsoft PowerPoint, it gets the job done. So that's what I use. But if you like Adobe, go ahead and use it. Google Suite, I know that a lot of nonprofits have the Google Suite, so you can use Google Slides as an option as well. And then there's a few other software options. Really, the important thing that you want to do is when you get to your final product, when you get to your poster, the majority of the sort of outlets that will print out your poster, they like to use PDFs. Okay, there may be some exceptions there, but the outlets that I've dealt with like to work with PDF files when they are printing. Ben, did you want to share some of your experience with do you think PDF is probably the most common file that's used for printing?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think I've only ever seen PDF be the preferred thing, and most of me and I were discussing in preparation for this some of the differences. She's kind of preferred to go down to a Kinko's or FedEx and have it printed there. I've always opted to upload them online, and you can have a place like MakeSigns.com create your poster, print it, and they'll ship it to wherever you'd like. We'll get into that in a couple of slides, but I will say, I've only ever used the Microsoft PowerPoint to build them out, but I do know other folks that like to use Adobe, and it's a little pricey to have that software, but you can really make some high resolution, high quality stuff in cases where you want to make a gigantic poster. The Adobe Suite might suit you well in that for that application, but really for the bulk of these poster presentations, you can make a 3-foot by 4-foot poster in PowerPoint really easily. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, Adobe is definitely much more fancier than PowerPoint. But yeah, like you said, usually for the uses that we have, PowerPoint, is really, it's perfectly fine. So speaking of, I'll talk a little bit about PowerPoint because that's really what I have the most experience in. So I mentioned that website there that has downloadable templates that are specific to PowerPoint that you can look at, and that website is on that slide. It's also at the end. The one thing I will say about PowerPoint, using PowerPoint for a poster presentation versus a presentation like what I'm giving now, is that you have to make sure that you customize the slide size. Okay, and I've given instructions here on how to get to that section where you can customize the slide size for both a Mac and a PC. And then you can take a look at these this text. I'll show you what it looks like on a PC because that's what I use. So when you go to the design, I believe it's the Designs tab. This is what comes up, and if you go all the way over to the right, you've got you can select slide size, and then you got a drop-down menu, and you want to go to custom slide size. Once you go to custom slide size, this dialog box that you see here on the bottom comes up, and you can customize the width and the height based on what the poster requirements are. Now, I should say that there are limitations on the actual width and the height in PowerPoint. So if you have, say, if you're in a conference where and this is totally hypothetical, I'm not sure when this would happen, but if you're at a conference where your poster requirements are 48 by 96, I think PowerPoint itself does not have the capability to go to 96. So what you want to do in this case is just make sure that your width and your height are to scale to what the poster requirements are. So if the poster requirements are 48 by 96, then you want to make sure that in PowerPoint you have your corresponding height and width are 24 by 48. Hopefully that makes sense. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take that at the end. So that's something that you want to be concerned with when using PowerPoint. You probably have to do this with any other software that you use. You have to do the same thing if you use something like Google Slides. I will say that with Google Slides, the thing that it does that's convenient is that it allows for real-time edits, real-time collaboration. So if you have more than one person working on the document, the changes will be done in real time. I do believe now there are some PowerPoint versions that allows for real-time collaboration, but Google Slides has been doing this for some time, as well as all of the Google Suite options. So that's software. Let's move on to the final product, the poster. Okay, so Ben sort of touched upon this earlier. So you have a number of options that you can look at when you are printing your poster. So you can do a Staples, FedEx, and Kinko's, or FedEx, Kinko's, or like something like Office Depot. And in all of these, I've specifically used both Staples and FedEx, Kinko's. I haven't used Office Depot, but I'm sure it has this option as well. You have the option to either upload your file to their website, or because these stores have these brick and mortar locations, you can save it to a flash drive and take it to your local Staples, FedEx, Kinko's, or Office Depot and go to their printing department and make an order there. And then in terms of receiving the final product, you can also go back and pick these posters up, or all of these, at least Staples and FedEx, Kinko's does, you can get them delivered to where you need to take them. Now, Staples, FedEx, Kinko's, Office Depots, all of their printouts, they happen on paper. So you have your options of like matte or glossy or whatever it is. And so when you have these paper posters, then you will likely need to roll them up and put them in a tube. So you can purchase a mailing tube there, or you can get a fancier tube if you want. But if you have paper, it's usually a good idea to have at least some kind of mailing tube to keep your poster in. If you are going fully online with something like makesigns.com, I know that there are other options like makesigns.com. You upload directly onto their website, and then they will deliver it to wherever you want it to deliver it to. They can even deliver to the conference that you're attending at. I mean, and this is also the case for some of these brick and mortar stores as well. You can choose to do a paper printout with some of these online options. I know with makesigns.com, and this is mainly based on my conversation with Ben, so Ben, I would feel free to add on to this. You can also, instead of choosing paper, you can also consider cloth printing, and this is a neat alternative because it allows you to not have to purchase a tube. You can actually fold your poster, and if you are traveling somewhere, you can easily pack it into your suitcase, and it gives you one less thing to carry at the airport and one less thing to leave at the airport. Ben, did you want to add to that?
No, yeah, I think that's a great point. The drawback of flying to a conference and taking a poster with you is that you got to carry this obnoxious tube everywhere you go, and then of course that counts against your carry-on items and all that stuff. So I've done things in the past where I've gone to a retailer online like makesigns.com or something like that, and ordered my poster and had it delivered to my hotel so that it's there when I arrive and I don't have to worry about carrying it onto the plane. Block printing is something that's certainly kind of in vogue now, where you see this more and more. You might think that the quality, the image quality, or things might be kind of lacking because they're printing it on fabric. But in reality, I've been really impressed with the quality of images that are out there. And if you can imagine at a scientific conference where people are showing things like microscope images of cells, where you need to have a real detailed image, I've seen that come through really nicely. So I wouldn't shy away from the cloth printing. I imagine it's a bit more expensive, but you could reuse that poster much more easily. And like Musumi said, you fold it up and put it in your luggage, and you're good to go. So just some cool different options that you have out there for actually printing out that final product. Thank you. One last thing that I'll throw on is kind of a do's and don'ts of posters. There's best practices. Sometimes you'll see people try to get around having to print a poster by printing their poster into sections on a bunch of like 8.5 by 11 normal printer papers, and they'll bring that out, and then they'll kind of hang them up in sequence so that the total number of loose papers, makes one giant poster. And it's not a good look, and it's hard to kind of follow along as well. It's if you have $40-50 to invest in a poster, it's well worth spending the money to have it professionally printed and put together in one large sheet.
Thanks, Ben. And I think that's a great sort of segue into my final slide, which shows sort of the cartoon kind of doing that there. But to summarize what Ben and I have been trying to say is really, when you are doing a poster, some of the most important things that you could do for your poster presentation happens before you actually do your poster, you construct your poster. Know who your audience is so that you can develop an effective take-home message. And then when you're constructing your poster, figure out what are the most important parts of your poster. Some of those things may be your title, or your results or your outcome section. And that type of information should be, at least some parts of it should be able to be viewed as people are walking by your poster, not when they're really close up, so that it pops out to them and it sort of draws them in and gives them the opportunity to look at the really cool work that you're doing. That's how I'll end that slide. One of the things that one of the websites that I drew some of this information from had this kind of presentation of a good poster versus a less good poster, which is what you see here. And mainly what you see is the difference is has to go back to that sort of idea of balancing between text and graphics. You can see that in the poster on the left, you've got, the title is really big so that you are able to see it from a distance. The images, you've got about 50% images, 50% text, whereas the one on the right tends to be quite text heavy. I should say, and Ben, you could comment on this, that I see a lot of posters like the one on the right at scientific conferences. And, really, when you're constructing your own poster, figure out what's important and what your requirements are. You may not have, a perfect 50-50 balance. But I think as long as you sort of are mindful of the use of text versus the use of graphics, you're probably going to be okay in coming up with a poster that is meaningful and effective in getting your message across. Ben, did you want to add something to that?
I was just going to say I agree. I don't think brevity is really a strong suit of a lot of people in the scientific community. You want to tell your story. And I think that if you've never made a poster before, you might think, oh man, how am I going to come up with enough content to fill one of these things? And really, when you get into making it, the challenge is really the opposite, is being succinct with what you want to do. And something that Musumi touched on earlier that I hope we're not going to, I don't think we're going to cover it in its own slide, but at most of these conferences, there's a defined series of times at which you have to stand by your poster. So they'll have, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. is poster session time, and then again from 3 to 5. And during those times, if you have a poster there, you've got to be posted up, standing next to it to answer questions and engage with people. But that whole rest of the day, the poster's just hanging there, and people are going to be walking by. And so you really want to make a poster that can tell its own story. So the balance of text and images becomes really important. You want to say enough so that people can get a good idea of what you're trying to do. But you also want to have enough images and enough data there in a compelling way so that people want to stand there and go the whole way through it. The poster on the right, you might lose me halfway through that second paragraph, and I'm going to move on to the next one. Whereas something on the left gives you a much more appealing thing. It's much more digestible to make it through if that person isn't standing right next to the poster.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. And so I will just finish off by sharing some of the resources that I use. This third website is the one that has the downloadable PowerPoint templates. Here is my contact information. If you want to email me with any questions, here's Ben's. If you want to email him with any questions. And I really just want to thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Mosami and Ben. What a great presentation. I think this really helped break down a lot of how to really prepare a great poster. I know both of you have such great experience in this topic. So we are a little short on time, but I did still want to open it up if there are any immediate questions from our audience today, to go ahead and type them into the Q&A on your lower right-hand side on your computer. I actually had a few questions, Ben, as we're starting to prepare our poster presentation opportunities for our symposium and our summit. How much, and maybe you guys may not know the answer to this, how much would you anticipate someone to be spending on a poster?
Like in terms of time or dollars?
Both.
So I think Ben had made the sort of like, what did you say, something like $40, $50? Is that what you said earlier, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, most of those online retailers, that's right in that ballpark.
Yeah,
right?
I think I've spent around that. Sometimes I've spent less depending on where I'm getting this, where I'm printing it out from. In terms of the amount of time to spend on a poster, I think it really just depends on how familiar you are with the material, which is one sort of starting point. I like when I have a deadline to when a poster is due, I like to give myself at least 2 weeks, but I don't know if that's crazy because that maybe that's too much time. I like to give myself at least 2 weeks so that like in that first week I can have a skeleton of what I want to present and of what I want to put in the poster and have a good idea of where everything's organized, and then I have at least a week to sort of like mull over it and be like, I don't like that there, I want to move those here. I don't know, Ben, what do you think?
No, I agree with you. That's right around the right amount of time. You don't want to agonize over it, but it's also something that you might have to go through a few iterations of before you finally wind up on the final poster that you're happy with.
Great. I think that really helps a lot of our community to find out how much time they should be spending on their posters. We also have a few chat comments that came through that I think actually are really great to share. Alan, who's joined us, actually wanted to share that, if you are using, to most of these comments about images and graphics, if you are looking at Google Images, he had mentioned a lot of them normally are low resolution, so they may not be good. If you plan to try to grab something off of Google Images, they may not be the best resolution quality, as most of you were discussing about. And it looks like he also says that he uses fabric posters and that they are a great alternative. I know I have personally seen a lot more canvas posters out in the community. It seems like they're a lot easier also to transport with you. So definitely a lot of the things you guys are talking about, it definitely seems some trending in the community. But again, I want to be really conscious of everyone's time that has joined us today, as well as Ben and Mosemi's. These slides will be provided with the recording. Again, hopefully within the next day or so. All of our contact information is on the slides. So if you do have questions that you start to rewatch this or ponder over your poster presentations, you can contact Ben and Mosemi, who have graciously offered their contact information. And if you are interested in presenting a poster and you are not joining us for our symposium, we will have our poster presentation options at our summit in San Diego in September, and these our abstracts will be opening on June 14th. You can check out our website starting June 1st for any updates regarding it in terms of our guidelines and time frame. We are very excited to be able to offer this opportunity at our summit, and we hope a lot of you on our call today will be interested in participating, and we hope to see you at our summit in September. And then lastly, join us again in May for our final workshop for our poster presentation series, joined again by Ben, as well as one of our wonderful advocates, Katie Jensen, who will be speaking on how to actually do your presentation and utilize your opportunities of networking at a conference regarding your poster. So again, the link will be in the PDF slides. And again, we hope to see you next month to enjoy our last series of our webinars. Again, these will all be archived on our website at a later time. And again, I want to thank everyone for their time today, and thank you again, Ben and Mosemi, for joining us today.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.